Chapter 40. Home Sweet Home. Belvedere, like St. Paul, had no power. It had finally stopped raining, but it was dark and hot. A light and spooky fog came rolling into town along with the children. Besides the faint flicker of candles, visible through some windows, there were no lights on anywhere. Verona finally managed to find it and then turned down her own street. As they drove, and the closer they got, the trio realized something seemed strange. Still, a few hundred yards away, Verona noticed that her home was the only house she could see on the entire street. From where she sat, the house at the end of the cul-de-sac was all lit up as if there were thousands of tiny spotlights illuminating it. And it seems to be moving. This was very odd indeed, and extremely disconcerting. So much so that Verona stopped the car before they got any closer. She needed to figure out what she was looking at. Quietly, sitting in the car, approximately the length of 2 imaginary football fields from her house, she turned to the others and questioned, "What am I looking at?" Neither of them knew, but all three agreed that they needed to figure it out before continuing. Verona turned to Jack and asked, "Can you go check it out?" Jack looked at her as if to silently ask, "Are you crazy?" but instead said, "What?" "I mean, can you turn, invisible and—" Verona's voice trailed off, as she felt guilty for even suggesting something that could be so incredibly dangerous. Jack was scared, but he knew that something had to be done, and it was true. He was the only one who could possibly do it without being seen. Jack eventually said, "I don't know, but I can try." Jack knew that Verona and Adam had done most of the heavy lifting to this point, and felt like he owed it to them to step it up, be brave, and at least try. Verona whispered, "Thanks." Jack looked at her and thought, "She actually looks more scared than I do." Jack bravely told Verona and Lincoln, "Wait here." Then he slowly opened the car door, trying not to make a sound. Once outside, his legs felt like cement blocks, but he took a couple deep breaths like Nurin had taught him, and he slowly began to walk towards the house. After a few steps, Verona and Lincoln lost sight of him, and each wondered if he turned invisible or just disappeared into the fog and darkness. Jack had turned invisible. He looked down at himself, raising his arms in front of his face, flipping his hand up and down. He had now confirmed it. He walked closer and closer to the house. Soon, he was able to see the source of the light. There were hundreds, maybe even thousands, of tall gray creatures with sharp teeth and glowing eyes. They were all looking directly at Assur's home, staring at it with a deadly focus. This lit up the place like the station wagon had lit up the VW bug earlier that night. Jack slowly managed to navigate through the maze of Jinn. He thought, "They can't see me, but I sure hope they can't smell me either." Being careful not to make a sound or touch any of the creatures, he finally got right up next to the house. Jack was not tired, but he was sweating. It was crazy hot, and his adrenaline was pumping. He bent down and leaned on his knees. He closed his eyes and thought of his friends. When he was ready, Jack opened his eyes, taking a long look at the creatures. Everything seemed okay. It did not look like any of them noticed the boy. When Jack was convinced, he turned and studied the house. Assur had boarded up the windows, and he had barricaded the doors. As careful as he could be, Jack walked all the way around the house. He did not see a breach or any easy way in. Confident that Jinn had not gotten into the house, he decided to return to the car and report back what he saw. Navigating the maze of Jinn was terrifying. They seemed to pack closer and closer together with each passing minute. Jack needed to squeeze through some areas, sometimes having to get as close as a couple of inches from the monsters. At these moments, Jack held his breath, and sometimes, even involuntarily, closed his eyes. Even through the hot, sticky air, Jack could feel the immense heat radiating off the creatures. Then, just as he had gotten almost all the way through the labyrinth of the undead, Jack made his first mistake, and it was a bad one, possibly fatal. He was focusing on a rather large ghoul, standing just to his left, when his foot inadvertently kicked an empty Diet Coke can that was left behind in the street. To Jack, the small can was as loud as a semi-truck crashing into a china shop. The invisible boy froze, with his eyes squarely on the large, scary creature just inches from him. In response to the noise, the Jinny turned, flailing its arms in Jack's direction. He ducked and narrowly avoided the blow. The beast missed, but kept on swinging. Now crouched down, Jack noticed that many other Jinn also heard the noise and were moving in his direction. He was discovered and was being surrounded. Jack saw a crack, and he didn't hesitate. He took off running. He pushed one ghoul out of his way as he sprinted. The Jinn realized something, or someone, was amongst them. And now they could hear the sounds of Jack's new shoes as they slapped the pavement. They all started swiping in the direction of the sounds echoing off the road. Jack was very quick, and he did his best to avoid the clutches of the monsters. But just as he was passing the last few Jinn, he took a long, sharp talon to his cheek. The force of the blow knocked Jack to the concrete. Jack flickered as he hit the ground, appearing to the Jinn for a split second before disappearing again. The Jinn continued closing in all around him. Dazed, but once more invisible, Jack felt the blood trickle down his face, then quickly scrambled to his feet, taking off past the last of the Jinn and escaping into the darkness. It had been over an hour since Jack had left, and Verona was concerned. Jack may be in trouble. She knew she had sent him into a dangerous situation, and knew that if anything happened to him, it would be all her fault. After agonizing for quite a while, she finally decided that she had to go look for him. Verona told Lincoln that she'd be right back and started opening the car door. As she did, she heard Jack's voice, startling her. "It's me, let me in." Verona quickly unlocked the passenger side door, and seconds later, the door opened for a moment and then shut again. When Jack reappeared, Verona gasped when she saw the teenager's face. Jack was shaken, but insisted that he was fine, and that the creature barely got him. It was true. It could have been much worse. But what Jack didn't know was the wound was more than a cut to his cheek. The Jinn's touch sent a powerful and deadly venom into Jack's bloodstream. He was given a death sentence, but he hadn't realized it.